building trust across the generations in your workplace. The world is in troubled times. The young people of today think about nothing but themselves. They have no respect for their parents or our lived experience. They have no self-control. They talk as if they know everything and they mock our wisdom. This quote is from a French fellow known as Peter the Hermit. He said these things over 750 years ago, back in the year 1274. That equates to about 37 generations ago. And yet you can hear essentially the very same thing today in pretty much any town or city across North America. Welcome back to Brain Chatter, where we listen past the daily noise and explore topics at the intersection of leadership, workplace culture, profit, and sustainability. I'm your host, Derek Brown. Tensions between generations is nothing new. It's one of those constants in human existence, and yet that does not negate the fact that it can be a very real barrier and problem in the workplace. Today's guest has done research on this and counseled businesses on just this topic far more than 100 times. Welcome to the podcast, Ryan.
Thank you so much for having me, Derek. And as you said, this is such an important topic that I think businesses are still struggling with these 37 generations later.
Through our work, I have often heard some version of, heaven help us, these new kids our HR department is hiring are going to be the downfall of us all. Next comes a litany of the newer generation's shortcomings. And very often a part of what is lamented next has something to do with the observations of poor communication skills and lack of basic work skills. But if you look under the hood of what is said, often what seems to be behind the words and complaints is this: I do not trust this new generation. Ryan, does this match your observations?
I do think that that's exactly how it manifests. And what it really seems to come down to, in my estimation, is that really each generation has a very different lived experience. And we interpret that difference as a misalignment in perspective. And so, it's not what's right or what's wrong. It's just different. And different is not right or wrong. It's just different. So it's not uncommon for one generation to see the other generation is untrustworthy because they have a different perspective on how to go about things that their generation would exhibit and how they go about things. So it's interesting that trust is a central factor that seems to come up over and over when it comes to the misalignment in perspective. But all of that is because each generation has a very different lived experience.
Let's take a quick look at which generations are actually in the current workforce today. Would you mind doing a quick overview of that for us?
Happy to. Veterans and seniors have mostly aged out of the workforce, with few remaining. Those were the cohort that was born between 1933 and 1945. A large part of the baby boomers still exist, but are quickly waning, with one retiring every 6 seconds across the 78 million that exist in America today. They were born between 1946 and 1964. And next, we have Generation X, often referred to as the bridge generation between the two largest generations in American history, with only 36 million in their cohort. They were born between 1965 and 1980. And then we have the millennials. They eclipsed the largest generation in history that preceded them in the baby boomers, with 81 million strong. And they were born between 1981 and 2000. Then we have Generation Z, which approximately has about 72 million in their cohort, who are now entering today's workforce. They were born between 2001 and 2020.
Thank you for the clarity on that. Allow me, if it's okay with you, Ryan, to state a few of my personal assumptions, and then let me know if you agree or disagree based on your expertise, if that's okay with you.
Certainly.
Okay. So one of those is painting generations with a broad brush seems to be very convenient and very popular, but it also does not make full sense to me. It seems like there are plenty of people in my generation that see the world entirely differently than I do and behave entirely differently than I do, including people who grew up in the same place and in the same time as me. What do you think about that?
That said, I think you're right. Stereotypes do exist across the generations. And I think media and individual experiences oftentimes perpetuate these stereotypes. But let's face it, stereotypes are a very convenient shortcut to critical thinking and discernment. And it doesn't include the nuances that fall outside of those narrow definitions of labels that we hear cast upon each one of those generations. It's just easier to lump people together in these broad categories. But if we're being honest with ourselves, we all see exceptions to these stereotypes in our all walks of life and interactions. And I think if you've had any level of life experience, you know exactly that there are folks that fall outside of those stereotypes. And we also know the detriment of gauging others based on a stereotype and how that can lead to grave misunderstandings of one another and only perpetuates the mistrust and misunderstanding that exists.
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you. A second assumption that I have, anyway, is there are plenty of people who frustrate me and annoy me in every single generation if I let myself focus on that. What do you think about that assumption or observation?
I think you're right on the mark. You know, it certainly happens to all of us, but would it really matter what generation they come from? Or is that just encountering different people with different perspectives, you know, leading us to the frustration when their perspective doesn't really match our own? And I think that's what it really comes down to. It's inconsequential whether from a different generation. I think it's a different perspective that ultimately creates that experience in each of us.
Well said. And the flip side of that is my observation that there are wonderful and amazing people that I've encountered from every generation.
No question about it. Considering you may recall NBC's nightly news anchor, Tom Brokaw. He wrote a book called The Greatest Generation, and it was all about the GI generation. That's the generation that preceded the veteran and senior generation that has largely aged out of the workforce. And he really lauded their resilience and their patriotism and their sacrifices during economic hardship and war. But I think one can easily do the same for all successive levels of generations that we've experienced since, given the accomplishments and the character demonstrated in each single one. Think of the seniors, the boomers, the Gen Xers, all the way up to the millennials. And one can see each have their own triumphs and their own accomplishments that shape today's world.
Another observation that, once again, is coming from a very simple point of view from me is I have not met a single perfect person from any generation during the course of my life.
Oh, Derek, you've got to get out more. No, just kidding. No, you're absolutely right. While no one generation or person is perfect, each evolve and create their impact, however clumsily and imperfectly.
Well, something else that comes to mind, a fifth observation or personal lived experience, is that I cannot make anybody do anything, but I can do my part to model the high-end behavior that I hope that those around me will match as it relates to how I treat members of different generations or otherwise. And if I want other people to see a good example, I don't have to wait around for that horse to ride into town. I can be that horse. What are your thoughts on this?
I love how you frame that. You know, it goes down to the old adage, be the change you wish to see in the world, or even be the leader that you wish you had. You know, we often discuss something similar to this in the KCA leader and team member sessions when we talk about my best argument for how I want others to behave is my own behavior. It sets the standard for others, and leaders ultimately set the tone for the organization for how they behave and what behavior they tolerate in others, as well as what they recognize and reward, both directly and indirectly.
Well said. A sixth item, if I focus on what I can control, in other words, what Derek can control, then there is plenty that I can do to build trust and connection between people of different ages who are in my same workplace. What are your thoughts on this?
Yes, I think, you know, it's foolhardy to think those in other generations should get to know me before judging me when I'm doing the same to them. As you alluded to, we must all be the model of what we want to see in the world. So, to set the example for how we want to be treated as individuals and not necessarily those stereotypes that are cast upon us and with all kinds of labels and judgments.
When you think of an example of where this has been done particularly well, or maybe a person that you know firsthand who has done this particularly well, what comes to mind for you?
Having led multi generational workforce communication trainings for over 15 years, the message really doesn't change, only the audiences. Which brings us full circle to your opening point about Peter the Hermit over 37 generations ago. Each successive generation thinks the next one is doomed or worse off in some way. And the reality is that we have all have a need to be valued and make sense of things. And the more we embrace this and how we view others, the more we model the behavior that creates that understanding, the trust, and appreciation for each generation. When it comes right down to it, we all want the same things. We just have slightly different perspectives on how to achieve those things.
Let's talk about two strategies, and people may call them different things, but for convenience sake, I'll just call one a mentor strategy and one a learner strategy. If I am in the workplace and I see someone from a younger generation than me who seems to be stumbling when it comes to building trust with other generations, or someone from an older generation than me who seems to be stumbling when it comes to building trust with other generations, what is it that I can do, whether that person is my direct report or not? It could be a peer or someone else. What are my options if I take the mentor approach?
We all have preferences, and those preferences are based on our experiences. So, helping the mentee understand this truism within themselves will disengage that judgment and replace it with a little bit of curiosity. And I think curiosity demystifies our differences and reduces that judgment that's so natural. Curiosity also invites them to explore and understand their preferences and the perspectives of others. So, by discussing an example of their preferences and perspectives, they might be able to see that someone growing up in a different generation with different experiences might have very different views on the very different experiences that they had coming up.
Well, the other side of the coin is there is something that a brand new younger generation team member can teach me if I remain open to learning from them. So if I take a learner strategy approach and look for what I can learn from a younger generation member of our team, what do I need to do and how should I approach the situation in order to learn from that person and also build trust with that person at the same time and acknowledge that they do know things I do not know, just as I know things they do not know.
I think people will be open when they feel that they're not going to be judged. So I think it goes back to creating an absence of judgment through curiosity. Simple questions like, can you tell me more about that? What in your experience helped develop that ability? Perhaps you could even explain that you didn't have an experience that would lend itself to their ability and experience or perception, and that you're just curious to learn more and grow in that area and ask what they might suggest. I think by doing that, it honors them and demonstrates your earnest interest to know them a little bit better while supporting their inherent need to be valued and make sense of things.
Well said. What about a person who laughs and says, well, there's nothing I can learn from them new kids? What counsel do you have for that person in the workplace?
I would say I hope their computer never goes down. Seriously, I would say if even one person has a different perspective or experience than me, then there's something that can be learned.
For someone who has worked in the same career field or even the same company for a long period of time, it is difficult to remember what it was like when I was new. What was it like on my first day? And I think that goes for all of us, as in those first days, those first weeks, those first months were probably quite intimidating for me and for you. If someone with longer tenure was kind to me or to you and tried to have our back, tried to teach us new things, tried to help us make sense of things. That really meant a lot. That really meant a great deal to us amidst the newness, the new stress of everything. In fact, among the other practical benefits to us, it probably helped build trust between me and this person who was treating me kindly in those ways because they were more experienced. They were kind in teaching me things that I did not yet know. What do you advise that I can do to be that person to someone else?
I think it's about embracing the opportunity to give back and be the leader that you needed and may have experienced or may not have experienced. Again, recognizing that we all want the same things: to be accepted, to be treated with respect, to demonstrate value and be appreciated. Sharing these things with others goes a long way. So tell stories of what it was like when you first started and the help that you might have received when you were new, and that there are others that have been of support to you, and you can try to do that, pour that cup out for them because you've received it.
There are also those people who will say something like, nobody ever did that for me. I had to learn the hard way. Why would I try to help somebody else have what I never had? What would you say to that person?
True enough. And I think that's a valid point to share that perspective. I would ask, is that approach in the best interest of that person or the company? Because I think that when someone says, no one ever did that for me, why should I do that for others? I think they're taking a very personal perspective on that. But remember, when we work for an organization, we have to go beyond our personal interest. And what is the organizational interest? The others may not have the same resilience or strength to persevere, although they may have the talent that the company needs. What if they decide to leave because they were not supported to learn and grow like you have been able to do in your career? We might have just wasted a ton of money and time, taking us further away from our company goals and values because we didn't take the time to support that individual, although they may have had the talent that the organization needs. And when you don't feel supported, you don't feel seen, you don't feel heard, you don't feel understood, it's hard to make sense of things. So I think we have to ask ourselves, are we adopting that perspective based on your personal interest or the company interest? And we have to put the company interest in the forefront.
Ryan, you've advised a great number of people on these topics in the past and still do. What important points have I missed that I should have asked you about?
Well, I think while significant external events are how generations and stereotypes are based, it's how these events that have impacted their perspective that we need to see very clearly that all we want are the same things. As I just mentioned before, we just have different ways of accomplishing them. So let us not be blinded by the stereotypes that are often used to divide us, but see the person as an individual and meet them where they are with curiosity. This individual approach, done with respect, is sure to enlighten both as a result of their communication and interactions.
Ryan, let me do an introduction of you for our listeners. Ryan has been serving the human resources profession for over 20 years. He's worked in the public, the private, and the not for profit sectors. He's delivered in person and virtual learning experiences to create high performance leaders and organizations. Ryan is a past two-term president for the largest local SHRM chapter in the state of Maryland, Chesapeake Human Resource Association. Ryan holds an MSA from Central Michigan University in Human Resources Administration and a BA in Labor and Industrial Relations with a minor in psychology from Pennsylvania State University. Ryan's experience also includes adjunct faculty professorship for the University of Maryland Systems, Towson University, University of Maryland, Baltimore County, Community College of Baltimore County, as well as McDaniel College and York College of Pennsylvania. Ryan resides in Pennsylvania with his wife and his two children. Ryan, as maybe the biggest takeaway from our conversation today, when you think about all of your experience helping organizations and teams make sense of generational challenges in the workplace, what has been some of the biggest lessons you've learned along the way?
I think we all want to be understood, we are seen, we are heard. And from that standpoint, we need to hold space for others despite their differences in perspective. And it's all about relationship. And relationship leads to trust. Trust leads to collaboration. Collaboration leads to accomplishing organizational goals and all kinds of other miraculous things.
Ryan, is there anything else that you'd like to add on the topics we've discussed today? Any questions I should have asked you didn't that you'd like to add?
Thanks for asking. I think it really comes down to being the model of what you want from others. Doing so transcends any differences, generational or otherwise. Remain curious, seek to understand, and treat others with respect. And you may just learn something.
Makes a lot of sense. Ryan, thank you for all of your insights and sharing those with us. I hope we'll do another podcast episode together in the future soon. I will share your bio and your LinkedIn account in the show notes, as well as other resources that can be found at brainchatterpodcast.com, so that anybody who may wish to connect with you can do so directly or learn more about you and your background. Thank you so much for your valuable time on this podcast episode.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Derek.
Brain Chatter is a production of Ken Chapman and Associates Incorporated. We assist clients across North America and beyond with leadership development, corporate culture transformation initiatives, behavior-based professional development for health and safety issues, individual and team assessments, conflict and performance management, succession planning, team building, and more, making a difference in organizations and individuals' lives for over 40 years. Learn more at leaderscode.com. And please consider ranking and reviewing us wherever you listen to podcasts. The more reviews or rankings we receive, the more the algorithms recommend us to new listeners. Thank you for your valuable time listening.